Well, hello, and welcome again to the 2012fad.com. I will be your host for this evening, and my name is Charlie Bluehawk. Last night, we talked about cells in the body, and how I am often asked if I believe in God, to me, the goddess. Well, I'm fairly certain that Satan exists, and I mean, she must, because she's got lots of followers, and they're all doing really well, practicing black magic and doing evil and hurting us and becoming wealthy in the process and eating our children and having endless wars and hurting us apparently is very profitable. So I'm fairly certain that Satan exists. And I'm fairly certain that God, the goddess, exists. Because if Satan exists, then God must. Certainly our masters believe that God exists, and they're at war with her and want to take their war against God into the universe. After, of course, burning all of us into a cinder first. To me, it seems to me that you and I are like individual cells of a body, and the body happens to be that of God. And that you and I create God just by existing. As cells of our body create us. We're not consciously aware of every single cell in our body. We can't be. Just as the individual cells of our body can't possibly communicate with us. We're too big. We're too beyond comprehension for the individual cells of our body to understand. And yet we're part of each other. I think that's what God is. That we really are a part of her, and yet we're separate from her. I mean, honestly, really, by all the logic there is in this world, personally, I should have been dead many times long ago. But here I am. I'm still alive. Well, I exist. I've actually died several times and come back to life. That's actually quite annoying, because being dead is very peaceful. I was going to say I highly recommend being dead, but I probably shouldn't say that. I was probably just dead to a point where I didn't catch the bus to the next world, and I was just waiting at the stoplight, and I got gone on the wrong bus or something. So I can't actually say that, but it was very, very quiet and very peaceful. Anyway, moving along. Tonight, I thought we might chat about with the smallest effort, and how in my life here, well, my existence here, I've never looked at people the way they truly are. I've always looked at the way people could be. I always saw people for their potential. I never saw how they really were. I saw what they really could be. The problem is, no one I've ever met has ever decided to make that little tiny effort. I'm talking about minute effort that was barely noticeable, to turn their lives from not much to anything to magnificent. And it's my own stupidity. This has been a terrible tragedy for me, a lifetime of disappointment and, frankly, abuse. The simple truth is that everyone here, everyone you've ever met, can be magnificent. You can, but you have to try. If everyone here could be magnificent if they only wanted to be, if they only made the smallest amount of effort to be, how amazing they would be if they would just try. And again, of course, in my time in this world, I've never managed to once, not once, convince anybody to even try. Never once have I convinced one person to make that little, tiny, hardly noticeable effort to be amazing, the way they truly could be. And it's been a life wasted. I have wasted my life seeing people as potential as opposed to reality. Please never make that mistake. It's tragic. I've done it. You don't need to. So whenever I hear some poor soul wish that they could help the average Joe, whenever I hear some really good guy say, if only average Joe knew the truth, we could change the world together. I just sigh. And I look very sad and I say, no, you're wrong. The average Joe, as dumb as we think they are, Joe or Jane average, the average Joe knows the truth. At least enough to know that they're being lied to. They know. Something inside of them, the dumbest person you've ever met, knows the difference between right and wrong. The most psychotic lunatic you've ever met, and I've met quite a few, knows the difference between right and wrong. They know. But do they care? No. Would the average Joe or Jane, would they do anything to make their lives better? No. Would instead the average Joe, the average Jane and Joe average, would they instead, when you tried to help them, would they just pull you down? Would they take all that you offer, your money, your time, your love, your effort, and then after taking everything you had given them freely and with an open heart, an open hand, would they just take everything you've given them and forget you exist? Yes. It's happened to me more times than I can count. Of course, I never had millions and millions of dollars to lose, although I did lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. That was bad enough. But I've personally met millionaires who believed in the basic good of average Joe. Joan and Jane Normal, they believed that with just a little effort, with a little knowledge, average Joe could be amazing, and we could take our world back together. You know where those millionaires are now? They're penniless. They're alone. Abandoned by the very people they spent all their money trying to help. Because they never figured out the basic, simple truth. People are cattle. You can lead cattle to knowledge, but you cannot make them think, really. And the other thing you have to remember is that average Joe hates it when you succeed. Average Joe resents the fact that you've actually made the effort to make yourself better. In New Zealand, they call it the tall poppy syndrome. In New Zealand, you have to tell your children, do not be everything you can be. Do not be bright. Do not be outstanding. Do not be hardworking. Do not achieve. Why? Because if you achieve and you're intelligent, you'll have no friends, you'll have no job. You'll never have a mate. Your only options at that point are to flee the country, which is what millions of New Zealanders have done over the last 40 years. The tall poppy syndrome. Look that up and look up New Zealand, and you will see that the average Joe, the cattle, resents and despises and hates you because you actually know how to do your job, because you actually cared enough to make yourself better. Average Joe hates to be reminded that they're average, and they